Be calm. Well, Dwayne, how do I be calm? Get rid of the things that don't let you be calm. You got people in your life that are just people of constant conflict, people of melodrama, just people that are always stirring the pot. They're not happy unless the pot is stirred. Just walk away. If you don't have a destination, how do you know when you've arrived? And how do you know how to get there if you don't know where you're going? Sit down and figure out, what kind of man do I want to be? And then begin the journey. Find somebody that you like, that you genuinely like, and figure out what it is about them you like. I like that. That's something I like. That person is, they're understanding, they're gentle, they're hardworking, they're honest, they're this. This is what I like about them. And incorporate that stuff into your own life. If that's the stuff you like, then incorporate that stuff into who you are. Where when I meet somebody and they don't like me, and you can tell, I don't care. And when I meet somebody that they're like, they really like me, it's like, okay, but it doesn't carry much weight either, because I'm going to be leaving. And so when I meet someone who doesn't like me, or I meet someone who does like me, it doesn't alter my sale. I would buy me a drink. I look at me now and I see all the warts. Okay, I see all the negatives more than anybody else does. I see the positives. And over the whole balance of stuff, I like me. And I can give myself the same grace. If you and I were friends, I can give myself the same grace I can give you, because I like me. I like me in spite of my understanding and the reality of my weaknesses and my warts and my scars and everything. But, all in all, I'm a pretty good dude. And, man, you got to get to that point. Outside of arrogance is pride mixed with ignorance. All right, that's the definition of arrogance. I'm not talking arrogance. I'm talking about, look, as a human being, I've failed at this. I've succeeded at that. I've wrecked this, but I've built that. And all in all, I've tried. And, but I like me, so I'm going to give me some grace. If you turn around and look back with open eyes at your life, you see all the scars. I mean, you can't, the only way you cannot be humble in old age is when you refuse to look at the reality of your life up to today. And so I'm right now trying to find the balance in undertaking something that's not going to alter me, that I'm not going to lose myself, and then not succeeding at something because I was too afraid to try it, which has never been an issue with me before. I've never been afraid of failure before. But now I've got something I don't want to lose. And that's myself that I actually like, a me that I actually like. Okay. Treat them special. And secondly is communicate. All right. If you don't understand what they're saying, if you're confused, sit down and gently say, look, I'm sorry. I don't understand. I don't understand what you're feeling. I don't understand, but I'd love to understand if you can help me. And just sit down and communicate. Just listen to them. A lot of times they just want somebody to listen to them. They don't want you to fix it. They just want you to listen to them while they take all this boiling stuff inside their head and put it out so they can actually hear it. And sometimes that helps them sort out all these thoughts that's in their head. They need to just put it out so they can hear it. And they don't need you to demean them by saying, okay, I'll fix this. Just listen to them.
Wish more women knew about how men operated.
He's carrying burdens that you don't have a clue about. And he don't know how to express them. And he don't know what to do about it. And he figures if he puts it out there and communicates it, he's just going to be shot down, called a fool, called weak. So he carries it inside. And you have no clue the burdens and the hell that most men are carrying inside and not even showing you. A lot of times men won't open up. They won't respond because it's looked at as becoming vulnerable. And it's like the little Dutch boy with his finger in the dike. It's a little tiny leak, But if I allow this little tiny leak, the entire dike is going to give way. That's why we can't allow the little tiny leak. Okay. So if I'm sitting here,
It's really true as a man, especially in America, that finger in the dike, it's like you stop that water and you take your finger out, the whole thing's gonna go. You start talking about your problems, and that was my issue for many years, especially my marriage. My ex-wife wanted me to open up, and boy, did she regret it. Because when I started talking about my day, I kind of used her as like a brain trust. I was, talking about work every day, getting her opinions on things. It kind of, that was kind of, I had a really toxic job, unfortunately, as my first position in corporate, like kind of really terrible people with no morals. And really bad for me in that way. But good that it taught me the lesson you just talked about, because I've made the mistake of taking the finger out and letting the water run through and letting, the dam break, essentially, the dike break from the water pressure. It just starts shooting out before you know it's all blown up. And it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle. Once you realize you have a safe space to kind of be vulnerable and talk about those things, it actually gives it more power in a way. And also, it's a trauma dump on the other person. I remember my ex-wife used to say, like, you don't ever ask me how my day was, kind of thing. Like, you get so wrapped up in yourself as a man that you don't even want to say it because it's all going to come pouring out. It's better just to kind of push it down. And then, the drawback of that is then now kicking the puppy sort of thing. My dad was kind of more like that. I think that's probably why I tried to go the opposite way. He was the type to never talk about, but then he was a little psychopath in a lot of ways, breaking things around the house, yelling, like completely off the rails a lot of time with his emotions, like kind of like a child in a lot of ways, like a temper tantrum. And remember near the end of my marriage, I started doing more of that. I saw myself turning into him when I started pushing it back down again after all the negative feedback. So I swung back the other way. I was being like him, you're keeping it on the inside. I remember because my ex-wife said when she found out how much debt I was in, I think I was in 20 grand of credit card debt just to pay the rent. And, I didn't, she was pregnant. And even before she was pregnant, we were married. I didn't want her to worry about it. She was going to school to be a doctor, basically. I wanted her to just like not worry about those financial problems and for me to kind of just suffer in silence in a way. And I remember when I told her about it after the fact, and she's like, well, you should have said something. You should have told me about it. And I didn't say why, but you know, I didn't want to offload that stress on her like I've been doing with the work stuff. So I think as men, it's hard. You can't talk too much about it and you can't talk too little about it, but there's a balance, obviously, that's hard to find. Um, you should talk to someone about it, I believe. You should have a release valve, but it shouldn't be your wife. Um, I remember I was friends with my boss who was like a lesbian. She had a girlfriend, and we would kind of talk about like our home lives a little bit. And she would say, like, yeah, I never go home and tell her about like the problems at work. I just say, oh, she was kind of like the guy. She was like the stud in the relationship. I met both of them. So she was kind of the more male one. And, I took I started getting better when I heard that from her because I'm like, okay, like, yeah, if you're like more in the male general, no one really wants to hear your problems kind of thing. Um, Now I kind of do the attitude of, I only talk about my problems if I'm forced to. Where like someone's saying you need to do X, Y, or Z, and then I'm like, I can't do that because of W. I have this going on. Can't do X, Y, and Z. Sorry. So it's kind of like I only reveal my problems when it's not a therapy session, like you said. Not there. You shouldn't be doing therapy with your problem. You should just be stating your problem as an obstacle as why something's not being done. So no one can accuse you of trauma dumping. You don't want to do that as a man. And the release valve, get a journal, write a post on Reddit. You know, if you do have a friend that you both mutually trauma dump and it's a safe space to do so, do that. But I always view like quarantine, you're crazy. It's like kind of like in corporate. I remember my VP used to say, like, don't show the client our crazy, like keep it internal first. We can act kind of crazy amongst ourselves dealing with the situation, but show, don't let them see you sweat. It's like the image of the duck that's just on the top, they're just swimming and they look completely calm, but their legs are kicking vigorously underneath. Like, don't show that to people.
And if I'm one of these guys and my significant other is sitting there, I can communicate to her what I need to communicate without being vulnerable. I can maintain my strength and communicate to her. Okay. I can say, look, I'm working 60 hours a week, and the environment that I'm working in is very, very difficult. And I come home and I only have 8 hours here at the house. And this is the only place of peace I have in this entire world. And when I come home, you're angry all the time. You're not satisfied about anything. You want that, whatever the situation is. If you're not going to provide for me that little bit of peace, that this is the only place I can get, what are we doing? Now, you're not vulnerable. You're not getting walked on. You're not being a jerk. You're not coming in, throwing stuff down and saying this. You're just communicating the hard reality truth is. The hard reality truth is our relationship at this point has boiled down to this. Now, you have a beautiful house. You never worry about there being grocery money. You have a car. I put the fuel in your car because you let it go to empty all the time. I provide this and this and this. And what I'd like for you is some peace and some understanding. To communicate it in such a way, not to come in and whine, not to grovel, and not to tyrant, not to yell, not to pick a fight. It's like, look, I'm just communicating because I think we have a lack of understanding here. So I need you to understand this is where things are right now. And so you can communicate, but how you communicate is just as important as what you communicate.
I think nowadays the relationships with modern men and modern women, it's more on equal footing. And so the 50-50 ideas, and even if you are providing and protecting, it's kind of not enough. His advice here, I don't agree with. I think you can say this, see how she reacts, and go from there, because you might not get the nice reaction of, okay, honey, your work, it's kind of like you still need to pick up your socks off the floor after a 12-hour day. And this part's really interesting, is what he's going to talk about um, with women and just talking to anyone in general. What he's about to say here is super important. It's the tone in which you say things, not just what you're saying. It really does matter. You have to show respect to the other person so they can actually hear you. So this is a great story he tells here.
Many years ago, he had a little dog, one of those little furry little rat dogs, And his one of his little joys in life was he'd look at that dog and he'd smile and he'd say, "Oh, you're so stupid. You're the ugliest, dumbest, most worthless dog I ever seen in my life." And that dog would just wiggle and roll over and he'd look at me and say, "It doesn't matter what you say, it's how you say it." Dog has no idea what I'm saying, but I say it in a loving tone and it's all good. There's a lot of truth to that in communicating with people. We can say things that are not necessarily blatantly offensive, but we can say it in a real belligerent, aggressive tone. And all they hear is the tone. They didn't even hear
Medium
the
is the
words.
message.
That's right. They don't even hear the words.
And I've kind of found that, especially in corporate, women are very good at that, of giving negative feedback with a smile on their face kind of thing. And even for me, when I've gotten in trouble at work with clients or bosses, I've noticed I just match energy. I can tell if someone's giving me negative feedback, and I can tell they're not trying to torch the relationship. I'm more willing to hear it, versus where I feel like people, especially a client or someone that's over me that has a lot of power over me, they're using my mistake as an opportunity to beat me down. Like they're trying to get me in trouble. I can see like the intent behind it. By having the mean tone, you kind of show, I think that's what he's saying here. even the dog can pick up. Like you could be saying that you love the dog, but you could be saying it in a mean tone, and then the dog's gonna get scared and run off. It's the tone kind of, we're emotional beings. The tone kind of reveals intent. I think they say like nonverbal communication is like 70% of human communication. You can kind of tell when someone is a friend of yours and they're giving you like, hey man, like I don't like when you do this, you're gonna naturally accept it a little bit more, but
You don't have the backbone as a husband and as a father to be the bad guy. You've got no business being a father or a husband. There's times when you have to know this is not a good direction for my marriage, for my family. And everybody's going to be mad at me. My wife is going to be mad at me. My kids are going to hate me. But in the long run, this is a very bad direction. And I'm putting my foot down, and we're not doing that. And you become the bad guy. But you do it for the long term strength and safety of the family. And we've lost that.
I find often too, you do have to remove your protection from people sometimes. It's kind of like if they're not going to listen to you, they're going to put everyone in danger. It's kind of like if you're in a minefield or something, as an example, and you're like, hey, like this is a minefield, like do not walk anywhere besides behind me, my direct footsteps, because you have the minesweeper. And they're like, okay. And then they start getting on their phone, they start walking off to the side. They could blow both of you up because of their ineptitude. So it's kind of like that as a man, where you can't have someone sink the ship on you, right? It's like you have to eject people, whether that's work or in your personal life. Sometimes I think with the villain stuff, people eventually will see that you were the hero. Sometimes they won't. They won't see it. But often I found people, they'll realize there was a method to the madness later, maybe years later, maybe decades later, where they see what you did for them.